Wherever you are in the world, welcome to another of my takes on China. As I get closer to that magic number of 25,000 subscribers, I'm really starting to see a reduction in the number of views. I'm not sure how I get more subscribers and less views. It's some kind of suppression, but I really do appreciate your shares. If you enjoy the content, please share it widely. Thank you. As Britain, Australia and the USA face more and more violent protests and an increasing number of disruptive protests which are peaceful, but they do create havoc to the lives of thousands of people, I think there must be a reason. And there is. It's because the government won't listen to peaceful protests. Do you remember how many millions went out around the world in 2003 before the Iraq War? Yet without UN approval and without the democratic process being followed, several countries joined a coalition of the willing to invade another country on the false premise of weapons of mass destruction. Why does the USA have a Second Amendment? It's specifically written because when people believe their government has overreached itself, they have the right to form a militia and take up arms to protect their freedoms and their democracy. Now, some people believe that's exactly what happened in the 2020 elections. And on the 6th of January, thousands of them stormed the Capitol building. Now, we may have been witnessing the early stages of revolutionary change, or we may have been witnessing what the FBI are calling criminal acts. History will tell us that in the future, sometime in the future. But what it tells us right now is that democracy is failing the majority. In the 1980s, there were mass protests in the UK, race riots in London and other cities, and I know this because I was there. The issues that existed at that time still exist today, and consequently, there are large bodies of people moving to the far right. The recent election of a far-right extremist in Holland was just one. Poland, Belgium, Austria, Italy, Hungary, and Sweden in Europe have all elected far-right governments in recent years, and let's not even mention Argentina. These are all indicators that democracy isn't working well for these countries, because as soon as small countries, and Argentina is very large, but as soon as these countries elect extremist leaders, the European Union, and of course the leadership of the US, decry the democratic process that they say they want, but not like this, because it's delivered outcomes that they don't like. CNN reports that Hungary is no longer a democracy because it elected someone the USA and the EU don't like. But not only did the country elect Orbán, they re-elected him with a larger majority. And now he's described in Europe as an electoral autocracy instead of a democracy. So wait a minute, what is this? The man was elected by the majority of Hungarians, not once, not twice, or even 3 times, but 4 times in a row, and is now the longest serving leader in the European Union. That's what democracy delivers. It delivers what the people want. In Hungary, people obviously wanted Orbán. 6 opposition parties teamed up to try and beat him at the polls, but he still came away with 53% of the vote compared to 39% for them. So like it or not, EU and USA, democracy is what people want. And if Orbán wants to deal with China, that's his democratic right. The Prime Minister of the Solomon Islands complained in the United Nations that he had received a barrage of criticism, his words not mine, because he, as the elected PM, went to his democratically elected parliament with the idea that they might deal with China. They debated it, the majority said yes, let's sign an agreement with China, and now his nation's democracy is challenged because it didn't deliver the outcomes that America wanted. The same applies in China. The Edelman Trust Barometer, internationally recognized, says 91% of Chinese people trust the Chinese government. Harvard Ash Center spent 13 years investigating and researching and came away with a similar number. Slightly higher, actually. In the same year that Edelman discovered China's trust at 91%, they found trust in the Biden administration was 39%. So people keep telling me that in China, the people can't protest. But that's wrong. It's written into the constitution that they can, and believe me, they do. A Swedish researcher citing a Chinese professor from Tsinghua University discovered there are about 180,000 protests a year in China, and that's almost 500 a day. It's a big place, so we don't see them often. But what happens when we do see them? Government officials come out of their offices, listen to what they have to say, and are constitutionally and legally obliged to do something about it. The protesters always get listened to. They may not always get the response they wanted, but they must get a response, and that response is reported through the system to the central government. So there's never a need to get violent, nor a need to get disruptive. But that's not to say they don't sometimes get violent. They do. But here's an interesting thing. There always seems to be a camera when they do. Now ask yourself this. How does that work? We live in a society where every person has a video recorder in their pocket. When something gets violent, someone will always be there to record it. It happens rarely, but it does happen. And you can be sure it will make it onto social media. And the Western media will be scrolling through for opportunities to find them and amplify them. Problems in China. But somehow, the only protests that I get to see that are violent in China are the ones where the BBC are already on the scene. If you think you live in a place where democracy works, you must be living in a place where there are no violent protests, no riots, no disruption to your lives because someone has glued themselves to the road, and no police brutality. Now, if you can please tell me when the last time a Chinese police officer shot or even shot at a person in a protest, I'll be surprised because I've never heard of it happening in 19 years of living here. If you can tell me when a protester was last killed at a mass protest in China, I'll be very sad to hear it, but it hasn't happened in my time in China. If it had, we can be sure the BBC would have made front page news for a week or more. These things just don't happen in China because when someone has a grievance, they take it to the government 500 times a day to be addressed. When people in the USA, UK or Australia have a grievance, what do they do? We all know what they do. It's on the news every single day of the week. And the UK, USA and Australia have all written new laws to prevent peaceful protests. I've linked them all here. China is peacefully listening to the people, being guided by the people, and managing the laws so that more than 90% of the people here are happy with them. And that is what democracy really is. You should try it sometime. It's quite nice to live under. Thanks once again for watching. I hope you like, share and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.